Anyone who's ever done anything worth doing has dreamed big, failed mightily, and mostly started from humble beginnings. This is a podcast about such people. The most fascinating podcast in the world is fascinating because of the stories of the human beings. Hello, everybody. It's Pat DeSerbo. The most fascinating podcast in the world. Has nothing to do with me and everything to do with the people that agree to talk to me. Today we have a really super, even by my standards, a really super fascinating person. His name is Simon Balint. Simon is an entrepreneur. He's a very industrious person. He's an adventurer, at least by any measure, but certainly by mine. He's traveled all over the world. He's led a very interesting life. He's an interesting storyteller, and he's a super hard worker. Smart and congenial. Good combination. Welcome, Simon.
Thanks. Thank you, Pat. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. So Simon and I met through work years ago, but we've spent some time, mostly over breakfast, over the years, talking about his life. But as you know, Simon, I'm in the habit of asking everybody about their earliest memories. I just wondered, from where you grew up early in life, what do you remember, the first 5, 6, 7 years of your life?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in Albany, New York. And my parents were pretty young. My mom actually had just turned 21 when I was born. She was still a student at St. Rose. My dad was 22. I think he was getting his master's at U Albany or around then. So we lived in a little apartment just behind Albany Medical Center, the local hospital. I have a couple memories from there, but my real memories, I'd say meaningful memories, started when I was 2 years old. My parents bought an old, completely rundown farmhouse out in the country, about 40 minutes east of Albany. It was I guess you call it like a hobby farm. It had been a farm, obviously. It was from 1800, but it was sort of overgrown. Had barns and silo, and anyway, they bought that, and that's really, I've got some great memories from there as a 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old.
What do you remember?
Oh man, that was the best. Actually, I think that and being a pizza delivery boy for Jimmy's Pizzeria in Troy, New York, are like my two highlights of my life. So, I get to be outside. I remember we had cows and horses and chickens and all that. So that kids love that, right? I would play out in the stream and the pond. It was a really fallen down old house, for sure. And my parents probably had no business buying it. But they took on the idea of renovating it. And so they were always redoing something, building something, tearing out a wall, a ceiling, whatever. And as I got a little older, I would help. So, first it was probably just handing them nails, but then eventually, I'd be helping, especially my dad, doing framing and plumbing and things like that. So yeah, I really enjoyed that time of my life. I was, by myself a lot. I did a younger sister, but, I was out in the country. So I wasn't like hanging out with friends or doing things like that. I was just basically, doing things with myself outside or with my parents.
Mm-hmm. Did you go to, when you got to be 5 years old, did you go to kindergarten or school out that way, or did you?
Yeah, so that's important to note. So no, my mom actually got a job at the local K through 12 college prep school in the area, which is called Albany Academy. So it's just a small school, but in this area, it's sort of like the prep school, one of the prep schools. She got a job there, and so I was able to go to this school for free. The tuition was fairly high. It is fairly high now still. We didn't really have the money for that, but I got to go there. And so yeah, when I was 4, actually, I started at kindergarten there, and I stayed there for my entire, primary, secondary academic career. So I was what they call a lifer, K through 12. And the school is, I'm sure people don't know about it outside this area, but it's at the time, it had a sort of a military component to it. It's a day school, but you wore military type dress uniforms. There was like a marching component, leadership element, but then the other normal parts of a school, pretty rigorous academics, and you had to do 3 sports, things like that. I will say, from what I've learned later from talking to teachers, I was extremely shy. So my kindergarten teacher, who became a family friend, actually said that I did not say a single word until January of that first year of kindergarten. Just, head down. I would maybe color or work on my letters, but I did not speak. I was that shy.
That's interesting. What sports did you do? You mentioned sports.
Well, yeah, you had to do sports, which I kind of liked, but I found it stressful. I wrestled. So you wrestled, right, Pat? And that's a whole experience. So I actually started wrestling varsity when I was in 8th grade. I was the 91 pounder and actually had the record for the most number of wins at the time. I don't think I was necessarily that good. I just was, I knew how to do a couple things that other kids didn't know how to do. And as I got older, the competition got a little bit more intense. But I wrestled, and then in the fall and the spring, I ran either cross country or track, really just to stay in shape for wrestling.
You wrestled all 4 years?
No, I did not. So I wrestled 8th, 9th, and 10th grade.
Okay.
And then I stopped wrestling. So to be honest, Pat, I did not like it. It was one of those things, and this is like maybe a cautionary tale for a lot of people. You should be really wary about doing things just because you're good at it. And I was somewhat good at wrestling, but I really did not like it. And I sort of had to play this role of liking it. But I really didn't like it that much. But my coach actually left at the end of my sophomore year, and I felt that I sort of had an out then to stop wrestling, and I did. Yeah.
Did you continue to run? Cross country?
Recently, no. I mean, I did run. You and I would see each other running, right? I ran through my sort of late 40s, and then no, I haven't the last couple of years. I struggled with, and this is maybe my own vanity here. When I was running in through my 40s, I felt like I was getting better kind of each year, and that was fun, and I would try to push myself more. And then for me anyway, around 45, I wasn't getting any better, and I was getting worse and worse, and it was just kind of hard to do. I should be more mature than that and should just run for the for the other benefits and for the fun of it, but I found it hard to do, so I did sort of trail off. And then I was working on some other things. I was working on some other adventures, which took up a lot of my time, and we could talk about that later. But I got into offshore sailing. You can't run a boat very much. So.
Right. So you went to Albany Academy, and where did you go for higher education?
So I went to Brown University for my undergrad. But I didn't go right away. I got into school in my senior year, as kids do. I was a bit young for my class. I didn't skip a grade, but I had started when I was 4, and my birthday was kind of late. So I was about a year younger than most of my other kids in my class. So maybe in part because of that, maybe for some other reasons. After I got into college, I just wrote them a letter and asked if I could hold off for a year and see them in 1991 instead of 1990. And they wrote back. It's kind of funny thing about it. It's, the old days, you just wrote a letter, right? So I wrote them a letter, and they wrote me a letter back like 3 weeks later and said, "Sure, I'll see you in 91." This was I graduated high school in 1990. And if you remember back then, the big news for me, and I think for a lot of people, was that Eastern Europe was sort of collapsing, which was really surprising, right? So the Berlin Wall had come down in 89, and then these other Eastern European countries were sort of opening up one by one. I thought that was really fascinating, maybe in part because my grandfather had been a refugee from Eastern Europe. And so in my letter to Brown, I actually said, look, I feel like this is a once in a lifetime experience. I really want to go over and see what's happening. And could I take a year off and see you next year? So I did. And I ended up taking that year and actually backpacking around Europe, but then ultimately like went all the way around the world and came back. Much to my mother's, I guess, frustration, she was supportive, but I came back like 2 days before my orientation started at college. I actually flew into Boston, and they picked me up and brought me down and dropped me off in my dorm room, and then I started college.
So let's start at the beginning of your what would I call it? Odyssey. Let's call it an odyssey. So you graduate high school, presumably in May or June.
Yeah.
And where do you go from there?
Yeah, so I graduated in June. I needed some money, right? We didn't just like get money, right? You had to earn it. So by my calculations, I sort of figured I needed like $3,000, or at least that was a round number I thought was what I should have to do this trip. And so I got a job as a blacktopper. That was kind of the highest paid job I could find. It was $6 an hour, and I think about it, but that's a lot of money back then. And the nice thing about blacktopping in the summer is you work like all the time. So I was working like 60-hour weeks, and I did that all through the summer. And I saved up my $3,000. Actually, I remember telling my boss early that my plan was to save $3,000 and then go overseas. And it was like August 20th or something on the Friday when he gave me my, paycheck. And I was like, hey, that's it. I got $3,000. I'll see you later. He was so upset. He's like, you can't do this to me. It's like August 15th. We need like 2 more months from you. I said, I told you $3,000. I'm going. I got $3,000. So that's it. And again, kind of just things happen quickly. I remember I quit. I went home. My mom actually helped me buy a one-way ticket to London. I think she may have paid for that or paid for half of it. And it was like on the Monday or something. So I called my dad. He was living in Albany, and told him, he knew that I was going to be going, but told him that I was actually leaving Monday. So I went over and had lunch with him. And then
so your parents
Monday went down to New York City and flew out to.
Okay.
They did, yeah. They got divorced when I was 6. Yep.
Okay. So you flew into London. What was that like? I mean, you're 18, right? 17.
No, 17 actually. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 17. So yeah, I mean, it was cool, right? I flew into London. I didn't have any plans, I should say, right? I didn't have any plans. I didn't have any accommodation. I don't think I had a book or anything even. There was no internet, right? So I flew into London. I went from the airport to the train station. And when I say backpacking, I had a backpack and a tent, and it was really like a backpack. So I went to the train station, and my memory from that is I met a couple of other kind of travelers that were hanging out on the platform. They were backpackers, but they were almost homeless, to be honest. They were kind of down and out. That was a little bit surprising to me. I had maybe a vision that was a little more glamorous. So the one guy, I think he'd been traveling for 2 or 3 years. He was from Sweden. The other guy was from France, and he had this like terribly bruised nose. And it turned out that he had gotten in a fight the night before with a homeless person over a bottle of wine, and the guy beat him up. So anyway, it didn't seem super glamorous on the first night, I should say. And it was kind of funny because they asked me like how long I had been traveling, and I said, well, I landed at 11 this morning. I thought that was hysterical. Yeah. So exactly. They were nice though. So, anyways, so I didn't know what to do. So from there, I took a train to East Anglia in the eastern part of the UK, where I um, had spent some time when I was younger. And I got there late and walked around the city for a bit until I found a construction site and just pitched my tent and slept there. Um, so yeah, anyway, one thing led to another. But eventually I ended up hitchhiking and traveling up to northern UK and got a ferry over to Scandinavia. And I think that's where I started doing my real travels.
Do tell. What was the chronology?
All right. Well, okay. So I got into the Scandinavia and backpacked around and hitchhiking. And so, I had $3,000 I mentioned, and I'm one of those people that, um, I do plan things out from a like financial perspective, or like when I had Halloween candy, I would count my candy and figure out like how many pieces I could have per week and make it last the full year. That was like the kid I was. So,
Not in my house. My wife would have found that
no,
candy
really.
and eaten it.
Yeah, not my sisters either. They would eat all the candy in like a week and then complain. But I had mine down to like every 5 days I could have one piece. So
We
anyway,
had a thing in our house. This is the true story. My daughter JoJo was like you, and she had her candy all rationed out.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife found her candy and she ate some of it. And JoJo knew. And it was a big to do. She's like, "How could you eat my candy?" And my wife was like, "Oh, I didn't think you wanted it because it's like 3 months since Halloween." Isn't that something? It's a big betrayal.
It is actually. I'm sure she hasn't forgiven her mother yet.
I don't think so.
So yeah, the $3,000. It's like $7 a day or $8 a day, right? So that's how much I had. So, I would often just hitchhike or try to get from point A to B as cheaply as possible. If I did take a train, then maybe I wouldn't eat much for the next day, things like that. So yeah, I traveled all around Scandinavia, mostly by myself. I did meet some people now and then, did a lot of hiking.
What do you remember?
I'll tell you one story, Pat, about like a low point. Go ahead.
Please do.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I used to say this, like the trip was an adventure and it was very formative for sure, but it was, a lot of it wasn't all that fun in that you're by yourself and it's kind of lonely. And especially at 17, I often was thinking, what am I doing and why am I here? And no one knows where I am. Remember, this is not a time when you're texting or, no one has Find My Friends. I would call back home every now and then if I could find a phone that was international, but it was rare, every month or maybe two. So I had this idea to go hiking in the Jotunheimen Mountains in Norway, just because I saw it on a map and it looked kind of cool. And it was in late October. So yeah, I hitchhiked and took ferries and buses. It took me about a week and walked. Some days I would walk 20 miles towards this access to the mountain like pass. And I remember I got there. This is after maybe walking like 1 or 2 days almost, and you see fewer and fewer cars. And I finally got to the access road to the Jotunheimen Mountains, and it was closed. There was a big gate across it, and it was closed for the season, obviously, because no one goes up there in like end of October. So yeah, that was a real low point, I would say. I remember I pitched my tent next to the gate and basically just cried all night and wondered why I was there and what I was doing. But you have highs and lows. My highs and lows tend to be pretty high, and sometimes can be kind of low. The next morning, I woke up. The sky was clear. There were cows actually had gathered around my tent, and I felt great. And I packed up and just started heading back. And I ended up meeting he picked me up a cop who was a retired police officer rather, and he drove me all the way back to Oslo. And anyway, my adventures continued. From there, I went down to mainland Europe and traveled around. And by November, I'd gotten into Eastern Europe, into Czechoslovakia and into Hungary. And then,
what was it like?
Yeah, and then things kind of got unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was fascinating for me. So these countries were sort of opening up to Westerners or to Americans, kind of one by one, and the traveling backpackers would share information like, "Oh, hey, did you hear that Romania is letting you in? If you go to this consulate, you can get a visa if you say this or whatever." So we were all kind of interested and eager to get over there. Um, the countries were, I mean, were beautiful, but they were kind of bleak from a economic standpoint, which was surprising to me. I had grown up as you did, right, in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, and the Cold War was always kind of front and center, and I would always learned about how menacing Russia was and strong they were and powerful, and at any moment they could come and attack us. And all of our movies were, the adversary was always the Russians coming to America. And man, we were in these countries in Eastern Europe, and there was hardly any food in the shops. You go to a restaurant, there'd be a menu, and 80% of the items wouldn't be available on the menu, things like that. So that was kind of eye opening for me. It seemed like they were sort of on the brink, and they were. And that's why the Eastern European countries had started to collapse, and the Soviet Union was still there, but it was also struggling. And I actually had a chance to go through the Soviet Union, and a, that was a crazy experience to sort of see firsthand this superpower that was kind of faltering.
What was it like? Remind me how you got the train ticket and all that stuff.
Oh man, yeah, that's thinking back on that. That's kind of an unusual story. So in Hungary, leaving from Hungary, from Budapest, and going to Beijing at the time, and maybe it still is, was the longest train in the world. It's called the Trans-Siberian Express. It's like 9 or 10 days and several thousand miles. So again, back in 1990, as an American, you couldn't really just go to the Soviet Union as a tourist, anyway. They did allow an American and other Westerners to transit the Soviet Union if you had like a reserve ticket, like entering and then a reserve ticket exiting. They would give you a visa for those 10 days to make sure you came through. So it was possible to take the to get this train and get this ticket, but not easy. So the way it worked was you had to go to the sort of government tourism office in Budapest, the official agency, and put a request in for your desire to take this train. They could make a reservation from Budapest to Moscow, but they would need to send a telegram or a fax or something to Moscow to their counter agency, and Moscow would then figure out a reservation from Moscow to Beijing. Once you had a confirmed reservation, you could then go to the Russian embassy in Budapest and get a transit visa. And once you had a transit visa, you could then go back to the government agency, and they would turn that initial sort of like soft reservation into a real ticket, and then you could depart. And obviously, that process between these bureaucratic governments in 1990 could take months if it ever happened. So that was kind of the dilemma and what stopped most people from doing it. But I met this guy, this other backpacker from Canada, who was hanging around Budapest because he was waiting on his ticket. And he told me that he had sort of made friends with one of the women in the travel agency, and I should come and talk to her. So we would go down there and chat with her. My last name is Balint, which is a sort of typical Hungarian name. So she was intrigued by that, and we talked a little bit. I say talk. We didn't really talk. We were like making hand signals, right? This is the way you talk often in places. So we're communicating that way. And she eventually said, "Hey, I could help you get this ticket. What I can do is I could give you a fake reservation, and then you could go to the embassy and use that and get a transit visa. And then if you come back with your transit visa, I can then give you a ticket to Moscow because I control that, and then I can give you a fake ticket from Moscow on. But once you're in Moscow, you can figure that out. They're not going to want to like have you stay, so you can figure that out. So that was our plan, and that's what we did. So we ended up getting the visa, and we ended up getting a ticket, and yeah, off we went. Sort of. There's more to the story than that, even. So the typical sort of like, this is like from a movie, right? Like Catch-22. Eastern European like efficiency back in the day was there were 2 trains a week that left from Budapest to Moscow on the Trans-Siberian Express. One left at Wednesday at 8:10 at night, and one left at Wednesday at 11:30 at night, and that was it. So exactly. So when we had gotten the initial like fake reservation, it was the 11 o'clock train. It's all in like Hungarian or Cyrillic Russian, so we didn't see it too clearly, but it was definitely like 11 o'clock. When we came back and got the real ticket to Moscow, she had given us the 8 o'clock train, but we didn't check or notice. So when I showed up at the train station at 11 o'clock at night to catch the train, my train had left. And the ticket that I had was no longer valid. So that was sort of crushing, right? Like what do you do? To set the scene too, Pat, like when the train would roll in from Moscow, it was sort of like a military exercise. So the train would roll in, soldiers would get off the train. The soldiers had, German shepherds and weapons, and this was kind of a heavy affair. So I go to get in the train. This is not my train. I'm talking to one of the soldiers, back and forth, and kind of trying to plead my case. And eventually he kind of looks around, and then he makes the universal, sign for money and says dollars. And I said, sure, whatever. He opens the door. He puts me into a car. He basically goes like this, shuts the door, and the train takes off.
How much?
Exactly. That's what I was thinking, right? So the way he said it was, I thought like, don't come out until I knock on the door or someone knocks on the door. So I was in the car for 5 or 6 hours. I think the idea was like, wait till we get out of Hungary, and then once we're into the Soviet Union, someone will knock on the door. So yeah, someone knocked on the door at 5 or 6 in the morning. It was another soldier. And she went like this. And so I opened my wallet, and I had some money in there. But it was kind of precious to me, right? So I pulled out a $5 bill, and she just grabbed it and ran away. And that was it. So it was $5 was my bribe to Beijing.
Bribe is a strong word. It's just grease.
I think that's what it was. What it was. A surcharge. You call it like what do you call it? Baggage charge now, right?
So you got off the train in Moscow, or no? What happened next?
Yeah, no. Well, so remember, I only had the real ticket to Moscow, although I wasn't even on the real ticket anymore, I guess. So my $5 got me to Moscow, and then I had this open ticket that was like not a real ticket. So I was going to see how that went. My ticket, I'm kind of making up the number, but I remember it being like car 2, cabin 3 or something like that, right? And again, they also was leaving at midnight somehow. These trains always left at midnight. So I spent the day in Moscow, whatever, bumming around, looking around, changing some money. And then went back to the train station. Again, these really long train. It's an 8 or 9 day train. So it was like 20 cars on the station, on the platform. I'm walking down the platform, and the cars are going in descending order, right? Car 8, car 7, car 6. I'm looking for car 2, right? Car 5, car 4, car 3, engine. So there's no car 2. So it was kind of in the same boat. This time I was talking to the guard, and I basically blamed the Hungarians. I said, look, I got this ticket. The Hungarians are so confused. And he laughed. He thought that was pretty on brand for Hungary, I guess.
Mm.
And so he let me on the train. Actually, I don't think I paid that guy a bribe. He just let me on the train and got me a car. So, and then I was off for the next 7, 8 days.
What was it like?
On the train? Yeah, so it was, again, the train had this like, facade of opulence. It was this classic romantic, train from the heyday of this, Soviet era, right? So velvet curtains and ornate woodwork and like a parlor you could sit in. So it had all of those trappings. There was a dining car and maybe a 10, 15 page leather bound menu. But when you asked for something, they didn't have it. They actually didn't have anything except for there were eggs and bread and potatoes. But after the third or fourth day, there were no more eggs. So it literally was bread and potatoes for the, 3 or 4 of the days. But I didn't really care. Mostly we were just drinking, to be honest. There was a lot of vodka or whatever they were drinking flowing. And everybody, the guards, the passengers, everyone that was on that train was basically drunk for 4 or 5 days. Yeah. So it was fun. When you're 17, it's a lot of fun.
So did you end up in Beijing? Is that eventually?
Yeah, so that's crazy, right? So yeah, you go to Beijing. Funny thing about that is at the time, maybe it's still the case, the gauges of the train tracks are different between the Soviet Union and China. It's a strategic move, right? So that in the case of a military incursion, you can't just roll the trains from one country to the other. They're not going to work. So the way they do that, the train comes to the border, and then you stay on the train, and a crane picks up the car. They detach it from the wheels, picks up the car, and moves it like across the train yard, and puts it on another set of wheels that fit the Chinese gauge, and then off you go. I doubt that's how it works anymore, but that's how it worked back in the day. So we got to Beijing, and yeah, unlike the Soviet Union, which was sort of kind of bleak and not much going on, man, Beijing was bustling. And that was surprising to me because I had never really heard about Beijing or East Asia. It wasn't on my radar as a happening place, but the markets were full. There were people buzzing around. It was extremely vibrant. Yeah.
How long were you there for?
In China?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, yeah, I'm traveling and bumming around for maybe 3 or 4 months, I'd say. So I had this goal. Okay, here's another thing. It's you also weren't really supposed to be traveling around China back then. You could go as a Westerner. You could go to designated cities. There were a few what they called open cities, so like Beijing and Shanghai and Xi'an, whatever. Some of the major cities, mostly on the east. But other cities you weren't allowed to go to as a foreigner, unless you had like an official guide or you on some sort of official tour. They certainly didn't want you in the more rural areas where they were maybe concerned about unrest. So, but that didn't necessarily stop you or us. So the way that worked was you couldn't get to a forbidden city, if you will, right? A non-open city by train because they wouldn't accept the open currency. So in China at the time, they had 2 currencies. There was one currency that you could use Western currency to exchange for, the yuan, that you could use that at Western hotels or in major cities. And there was another set of currency, which was people's money, RMB. And people's money you weren't allowed to get officially, but that's the only currency you could use to take these trains to areas outside the main cities. But you could trade your yuan for RMB, on a street corner, and then you had some RMB, and then you could buy these tickets. So we, people I met, myself and a couple others, we went here and there, and our goal at the time, I sound really like bad telling all these stories, like I'm a troublemaker. I'm not really a troublemaker, Pat, but I'm more of an adventure seeker. So
Sure.
I wanted to go to Tibet, right? I wanted to see Tibet, but you're not allowed to go to Tibet. So we tried, went as west as we could on trains, and then hitchhiked, and ended up myself and another person who ended up marrying, my wife, from Elise from Australia. But we ended up meeting in this adventure. We ended up hitchhiking with these loggers, and we got into eastern Tibet with them. So yeah, in total we spent about 3 months, I'd say 3 or 4 months, till we were so cold, and we went to Hong Kong.
That's incredible. Do you have any other stories about China? Like your travels in these cities? Any funny stories? Any danger?
I got some stories. Danger, I'd say the most dangerous thing in all the travel I did was like the transportation, right? It wasn't the people. It was like yeah. So Elise and I were taking this sort of bus. I remember going up in Tibet, so some mountain pass, and it's just a one bus width road up in the mountains. And so when you look out the window, you don't see the road. You just see, the cliff going down.
The abyss.
Yeah. The abyss. And if you look really closely, you see other buses down there, right? Like little skeletons of old buses. So yeah, that's probably the most dangerous. One time they actually made us all get off the bus because the bus was going over, the road was so uneven, and the people on the bus was too much weight. They were afraid the bus was going to tip over. So they made us get off, and only the driver did the one, half mile, and then we got back on the bus. So things like that. Man, I found a dead person once in China. That was kind of a meaningful event, a memory for me. That was kind of something I think about still. It was in a small town, actually, and there was he seemed kind of a young man, maybe a little older than me, maybe in his 20s, and he was begging on the street, and I just sort of walked by, and the next morning, it was the winter, right? So it was pretty cold. The next morning when I came out, he was lying on the street. So I actually went over there to see if he was okay or whatnot. And I turned him over, and yeah, he was dead. His eyes were open. His mouth was full of dirt when he was dead. That's actually the first and only time I've ever had that kind of experience. But it was it kind of shook me a little bit. One, that I had kind of walked by him the night before, and maybe I could have done something for him. I'm not sure. And also that he seemed like he was my age. And, you kind of wonder what happened in his life for him to be at that place at that time. So yeah, when you're traveling, and you know this, Pat, you've done some travel too, right? There's so many stories, and so many stories like that where you come across unusual things or you meet unusual people. And, there are a lot of those little pieces of that experience that stay with you for a long time. And that's one of those.
So then you went to Hong Kong. By the way, this time in China, were you traveling with your girlfriend or now your wife that entire time?
Yeah. In China, I was. Yep. We had actually met in Hungary at a like a guest house, and then traveled together as friends, and then later became romantically involved. But yeah, I was with her, and then we got to Hong Kong, and I think I was pretty much out of money at that point. I guess my $7 a day, I kind of blown it. Maybe when I was with my my future wife, I was not paying attention to my finances as well. But I got to Hong Kong like in March or so, and we were out of money. Both of us were out of money. But Hong Kong was bustling, and we got jobs. So she got a job at a bar, like a British pub, and I got various little jobs. I got jobs sort of teaching conversational English. I got a job as a like a model for like art classes. That was kind of funny. And I even got a job at like a rugby tournament selling all these things are really bad, Pat. Now it's out in public. Selling like knockoff, hats and fake T-shirts or whatever that I shouldn't be selling. But this guy had gotten them printed in the Philippines, and he was giving me like $5 a shirt to sell them. He sneaked me into the stadium in the morning, and I walk up and down the aisle selling them. I made like $200 one weekend.
That's great. Hard to do today.
A lot of these things are kind of like, before the digital age, right? For sure. So we had a good time in Hong Kong, and we saved up a few $100, enough for a ticket to Japan, because we heard that's where things were really happening. And we flew to Japan, and I ended up spending like that last 3 months in Japan before going home for college, doing whatever. My first job there was washing taxis. I washed taxis from midnight till 6 in the morning. So if you've been to Japan, Pat?
No.
Yeah, it's a great and interesting place. I've ended up spending a lot of time there, but they have a great taxi culture, right? People, the taxi drivers take their job very seriously. The taxis, they look like little kind of old school limousines. They'll have curtains in the windows, usually like a lace covering in the back seat. The taxi drivers wear white gloves, a little hat. They really they put a lot of pride into their taxis, at least back then. And so usually at the end of their shift, every night they would have their taxis washed, so it was sparkling, the next day. And so there were these places, like big warehouses, where the taxis would drive in at midnight or 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning, whenever they were done with their shift, and we would wash them by hand, polish them, wax them, and then they would go. So I don't know why they hired me. I mean, I don't speak Japanese, and I didn't have a visa or anything, but they hired me, and I worked there at night, which was nice though, because I don't know, I worked really hard. I did a pretty good job, and they promoted me, so to speak, after a couple of weeks, from the outside washing, which anyone can do, to the inside vacuuming. That's like a higher end job. And one of the benefits if you vacuum out the insides is you could keep any coins that you found. And in Japan, the lowest denomination for a bill is $10. So everything less than that is a coin. So they've got $5 coins and $2 coins. So I mean, I was raking it in. I thought, I was making like $20 in coins a night, but I thought that was pretty good.
Sure. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So then you came back. What became of the girlfriend, now wife, during college?
Well, yeah, that's an issue. So first I remember I called my mom like sometime around, August 15th, and said, "Hey mom, I don't know if college is all that important really, like there's a whole world out here." And, I have a great relationship with my parents, and they've always been very supportive, and I don't think we ever really had any kind of fight. That's the first time I remember she got really mad at me on the phone. And she's like, no, this is not an option. You are coming back, and you're going to go to college. And, the main thing is I had a girlfriend, right? So I didn't want to go. But I did. So I went back to college, and Elise, she stayed in Japan. And the idea would be that we would, reconnect after my freshman year. So I would come back to Japan in, whatever, May of the following year, which I did. She actually had gone home and gotten like a work visa, which you can get as an Australian, and gone back. So she had a more of a normal job. And I came back and met her. And then I went back to college. And then we would meet, so for winter break, right? I take my last exam on December 12th, and literally I would go from the classroom to the airport, and catch a flight to wherever she was. She was maybe one year she was in Thailand, and next year she was back in Australia. So we did that and got ourselves through the first couple of years, and then she ended up coming out to the U.S. and stayed with me at college for a couple of years. Actually, yeah, she stayed. My roommate's great, So yeah, she just basically stayed in our dorm room. So there was 3 of us in that room.
Wow. I don't know if you could do that today either.
Yeah, it's probably not so kosher, but it was fun. He owed me actually a little bit, so it was no problem that I had, someone in my room for a change.
Got it. So you get out of college, and what do you do then?
Yeah, so when I went to college after having spent some time in Asia, and being kind of interested in it, I decided to major in Asian studies. It was interesting to me, and at the time, sort of the rise of Asian economies was the buzz in the early 90s. So I kind of thought that was interesting. So I studied Japanese at college and studied like Japanese language and then Asian, economics and history and culture. And I got a job in Japan. So Elise and I got married after college, and then we moved to Japan. And we ended up spending actually 4 years there. I got the first job just as an English teacher. That's like the easy way to go overseas and work in Japan. But I ended up working at a pretty high growth kind of early stage company that was building these foreign language schools. And so within a couple of months, I was running a school, and then another couple of months I was opening schools. We actually were opening like a school a week after a couple of years I was there. And I spoke Japanese, so then I got to go work in the head office, which was a Japanese staff office, and my job was sort of like the real estate management. So every time we opened a school, we would need a dozen or so foreign language teachers, which we would recruit, and then they needed a place to stay. So my job was to go and find like apartments for them, or find properties we could buy and make into apartments for company housing. And then if the employees got into trouble, I was the one to go out and meet with the landlords or the police or whatever, and try to smooth things out.
How's your Japanese today?
Oh man, I don't know. I think pretty bad. I don't really use it anymore. Every now and then it'll come to me in a dream where I'll, but I won't be speaking fluently. I'll be like trying to speak with someone and kind of struggling. But it was good at the time. I studied all the time. I had a long commute, about an hour each way on the train. So I would do flashcards, and I took the national exam. And actually, the highlight of my Japanese language, I would say, if I want to brag a little bit, was, I would have to go out to these. Is that me?
Yep.
I'm sorry. Pat. I would need to go out to these, rural areas to meet with a local real estate agent and go look at properties. And so I would call them on the phone, and we would make plans for meeting, at the station and what we're going to do. And you speak Spanish?
Spanish.
Right? Yeah. But maybe you know this, right? Like if you speak a foreign language, sometimes you can just have a good day and sometimes a bad day, and sometimes things just click, right? So whatever, for some reason things were clicking. So I was speaking on the phone with this agent. We're talking back and forth and making our plans. And so finally the person says, "Okay, I'll meet you at 1:00." And the person says, I'll be in the black suit, and I'll have the red umbrella as a way to find this person. And I said, "Okay, great. Yeah, thanks." And they said, "Well, what will you be wearing?" And I was like, "What do you mean? I'll be the foreigner." And they're like, no, stop joking.
Oh,
what are you going to be wearing? I was like, no, seriously. Right? I mean, I don't know how that happened. Maybe it was a bad connection and he was confused or whatever, but that was like that was the pinnacle of my Japanese ability, where
Hmm.
the guy asked what I was going to be wearing so he could identify me in a crowd in some station. So
That's
anyway,
the highest form of praise and flattery for sure.
right? Yeah, but it's not that. And now it's I don't get the chance to speak it at all. So, but it was that chapter of my life. It was fun. I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed learning it. The nice thing about a language, obviously, right, is when you learn a language, you actually learn a different way of thinking, right? Language and language is a proxy for thought, obviously, right? We one word is several ways of thinking, and we do our best by making words out of it. But if you can learn how other people speak, you can get a glimpse in how they think. And Japan, is a very different country and a very different culture. And when you can begin to speak the language, I think you can also begin to maybe understand the culture more too, and how people think, and it makes your experience there much more valuable. So I really enjoyed that time in my life for sure.
Mm, me too. So how did you end up back in Albany and with Bullocks and so on and so forth?
Oh yeah, so things were good in Japan. I like it. Um,
Can you
my
explain
wife got
Bullocks, by the way?
sorry.
Can you explain Bullocks?
Yeah. Well, the company, yeah. So the when I got back into Albany and well, eventually, and then started with this company Bullex, which is where I spent about 10 years. That was it was a startup company that spun out of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which is the kind of engineering school here locally. And it was a company that where we designed and manufactured and sold simulation equipment that was used for training first responders in how to deal with emergencies. So this was like actual hardware simulation equipment, so not virtual, but things you could drop on your foot. And we would simulate fire, for example, that would be used for firefighters to train on how to put out a fire. Or we would simulate a chemical spill or an explosion or a collapsing building. Or it kind of progressed from there. So we began making individual pieces of equipment, and ultimately we would build training cities all over the world. So towards the end of our run, we were making kind of, we would say, like Disney World for firefighters. So these would be maybe 10, 20 acre cities with high rise buildings that would catch on fire, or subway stations, or aircraft with fuel oil spills, ships that would sink, virtually, fill up with water, things like that. Um,
So how did
um,
you get involved?
yeah. So when I got back, we left Japan. I came back to the U.S. and I I was interested maybe in starting a business or doing something. So I got a job at the incubator at RPI. The Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute has a business incubator that's designed to help student and faculty ventures grow. And so I got a job there. And the nice thing about that job is that you're surrounded by entrepreneurs and would-be entrepreneurs. And part of my job was to teach actually in the business school, and to be a guest, like maybe lecturer in different classes. And so I was involved in a engineering class where the students, undergraduate students, were tasked with coming up with a patentable idea that had social benefit. That was the mandate for the class. And so I was sort of a judge in this class, and one of the group of students had an idea for this fire simulator. And so I kind of became their mentor as they were beginning to come up with the business ideas. And then once they started the company, I quit and joined the company.
Mm. What was your role?
Um, yeah, so the first three C level positions were taken, right? So CEO and so I was technically the chief administrative officer. My initial role was to try to help with raising money and business development, and I also did the finances. But after a couple of months, it kind of seemed like I was pretty decent at sales, and so I took over the sales activities, and ultimately, while I was there, I ran the sales group, and I would say business development too. When we got into partnerships with other companies or acquisitions with other companies, I led that effort.
Mm-hmm. So my recollection is that you traveled all over the world in your capacity as director of sales or whatever your title was at Bullocks.
Yeah, we the timeline was kind of compressed, as sometimes it can be for a startup. So
Mm-hmm.
we became international really quickly. We started selling product in sort of the end of 2025, a couple units a week sort of thing. And then by early 2005, early 2007, we were selling in the UK and in Australia, and then 2008 in Europe. And then by 2010, we really got into these sort of like large scale training centers. And we were selling those wherever they were large, centralized fire services. So they typically were overseas. That's the way it's structured. So Shanghai, Melbourne, Abu Dhabi, London, Paris, places like that. So yeah, my job. Oh boy, I got very familiar with C-20A on United Airlines. In 2012, I actually counted. I flew like 230,000 miles. Um, you know, not business class. It was my money, right? So I was flying economy plus. Maybe I would do because I had enough points. But a lot of hours on the airplane and a lot of time overseas.
Why was it your money? Were you an owner at that point, or?
Oh yeah. So when I joined the company, I was an owner. I did
Mm-hmm.
mention that. So there were four directors, 5 owners total. 4 of us were sort of the directors, and we didn't end up taking any outside funding. We didn't. We were able to bootstrap it ourselves. So yeah, we owned the company, and I am kind of miserly in a way, so I wasn't going to waste money on business class seats. I typically would do red eyes, so I could also save on a hotel room, right? And then you land in the morning and you keep going. So
Mm-hmm. And what are you doing now?
yeah, that's a fair question.
Mm-hmm.
So we sold that business in 2012 to a
Mm-hmm.
strategic buyer. And we stuck around. I say we, the partners and I stuck around for a couple of years. And then I actually did sort of consulting with them, part-time help with their sales for almost 4 years. It's kind of hard to say goodbye entirely because you are emotionally connected to these things you create, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, after that, I really wanted to stay local and spend time with my kids who were now in high school. And so I began buying and restoring historic buildings in Troy, New York. So Troy is a small city in this same area that I grew up in. Kind of unique because it was one of the wealthiest cities in the country back in the 1870s and 80s, and it was then sort of forgotten. So it has an incredibly intact downtown historic area with a lot of really beautiful homes that maybe are a little neglected, but very stately Gilded Age mansions, basically. So I've been buying those and with my partner restoring them, and yeah, we rent some as apartments and some as commercial spaces and art galleries and things like that. And that's how I've been keeping busy.
How many of them do you have at this point?
Oh, I don't know if I should say. I have a few. Keeps me
Okay.
busy.
Is there anything you might like to add or any questions you might have for me or comments or about our conversation today?
Well, what can I say? you know, I guess maybe one thing I would want to maybe add is that um, people have often asked me on this, like all these international experiences or these travels as a young person, that um, you know, were you afraid, or did you find yourself like, I guess, how did you get the idea or the courage to do something like that? And I think that I would certainly say I never felt it was like a risky thing to do at the time, and I didn't feel I was being courageous. And actually, if I think about myself, if I describe myself as a kind of a cautious person and a sort of a risk averse person. Um, and then sometimes people respond with, "Well, that doesn't make any sense because you took a one way ticket to the UK and then backpacked around for a year." Um, but my response to that is that, yeah, that was like a no risk activity, right? Like I was already in college. I deferred for a year. I was 17 and I had $3,000 in my shoe. It didn't like there was really no cost or risk to doing that. So that was not a courageous thing. That was just basically taking advantage of an opportunity to do something. And I think many of the other things I've done in my life, in starting a business or um, some of the other adventures, I've never really seen them as being risky. I always saw them as like a rational opportunity. So um, when I got involved with Bullex, the startup company Bullex, my rationale for that was that my kids were like 6 or 7 years old. And so I had sort of 11, 12 years before they had to go to college, before I had to start making like tuition payments. So I had a pretty good window to go do something, and it could fail, and I could still then go get another job and and make things work. So I saw that as sort of not really a big risk to quit my job and do a startup.
Mm. So could you envision either of your children when they're 17 going and doing what you did?
Mm, no, no, I don't know. So that's the other thing, right? So how did my parents like let me do that? Um, I give them a lot of credit. They were really supportive. I'm sure that I didn't come up with this idea on my own, right? I'm sure that the seeds of these kind of ideas came from my parents, maybe came from things I said over the years, or maybe their slightly unconventional background. Um,
Maybe your grandparents.
and yeah, there's that too, right? So we're all a product of what of the people around us, right? So um, that's an interesting point, Pat. Like, uh, so when I was growing up, your older my grandparents. I often thought of them. I had a great relationship with them, um, but I sort of saw them as a little conservative, a little older, a little more status quo because they were older. But then when I got older and began to think about it, no, I mean they were absolutely like kind of adventurers. My granddad fled Hungary when he was a teenager and went to the UK. My grandmother, who was an only child in a kind of well-to-do family, um, in the 30s, she wanted to join the Navy and kicked and screamed to go join the Navy. And actually, the Navy wasn't taking women at the time. So then the second choice was to become a doctor. And she convinced her parents to let her go to med school. And she was one of the first 6 women, the first class at Cambridge Med School. And then she marries this Hungarian refugee, who's his father had fought her father in the First World War, right? So I don't think her parents were all that excited by this engagement. And then once they got married, they left the UK and came to the US. So yeah, I mean, that kind of family history, right, has an impact, and those little stories do have an impact. So, um, But I don't think I'm unique in that, right, Pat? I think everyone's got those kind of stories in their family, in our country especially, right? We're all kind of the products of people that took a risk, right? People that kind of did something unconventional. That's for sure.
Everything you do has some kind of risk. If you stay stationary, there's risk. If you move, there's risk. I think most people who make big moves, like to move from your homeland to somewhere else, generally speaking, are doing it for either because it's dangerous where they live, as in possibly the case of your grandfather. He saw a reason to leave for safety, maybe, and or to improve their circumstances, right? Opportunity to make money. I think so much
Mm-hmm.
of the world, there's just no upside potential in staying where they are and or where we are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we all take risks every day, just walking outside of our house, we're taking a risk, right? There's also a risk in staying
Mm-hmm.
inside. If I don't ever do new things, I'm
Yeah,
not going to grow. My life will get very small very quickly if I don't do new things.
yeah, yeah. I think also sometimes you hear that, okay, this person is risk averse or this person was a risk taker. I don't really buy that description either. I think they were all to some extent risk averse, meaning not that we avoid it, but that we want to measure and calculate risk. I think that's in our DNA, obviously. Um, the issue is that people will perceive risk in different ways, right? So in my case, for example, that one minor story of traveling around the world, I did not see that as risky, right? Because I had a free year. Take advantage of it. That was not a risk. It wasn't that I was, throwing caution, it was risky. I didn't think that was risky. Other people, though, however, do maybe sometimes think going outside is risky, and they don't do it. I think we're all in the same. We're all measuring risk. It's just that we perceive it differently.
Back when I was drinking, I used to go to the Mill Road Acres golf course in Latham because I lived right across the street.
Mm-hmm.
And I met a guy in the
Mm-hmm.
bar there one time and used to see him regularly. And he had never been out of Albany County. Like, never been to
Mm-hmm.
Saratoga. Never. I'm like, you're kidding me. No, town of Colony, I sit here, I go here to work. So I went to the city of Albany to see Sienna play one time. Who knows what? It was just, I said, oh, yeah, I live in I grew up in Galway, small town, just west of Saratoga. Have you ever been there?
Mm.
Nope, never been to Saratoga County. Like, it's only like 10 miles that way, so
Yeah, 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 yeah,
it's
yeah.
just some people feel it'd be risky to go to Lake George, I guess. I don't really know. I just couldn't believe it. And I think, so
Yeah,
maybe
I mean,
not surprisingly, I think there's a lot of people that way. I remember, people from Amsterdam when I was growing up, never been to Albany. I lived in Galway, it was the next town
mm,
over. I probably never went to Albany until, I don't know, college. I guess for sports, I went various places because that's where the bus took us. But, if you don't play a sport in high school and you have, or, reason to go somewhere for an event, maybe you don't go very far.
mhm,
Maybe your family didn't
sure.
have a car, especially back in the old days. But um, is there anything else that you might like to say before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I'd love to talk to you all day, Pat. It's really fun. We
Likewise.
should talk more often, actually. But yeah, no, I've enjoyed talking with you today.
I I always enjoy our conversations, and I want to get this on the record. You're the only person that ever sent me the book by Herodotus. You
Oh,
remember
really?
the book you sent me, and where he talks about, I think the famous quote is, "You never step in the same stream twice, even if you step in the same place. It's not the same stream." And you wrote an inscription,
Mm,
and the inscription said, I can't remember if it was 2,000 or 3,000, but 2,000 or 3,000 years, and not much has changed. And
Oh yeah, I do remember that now.
I think of it a lot. Like there's just these certain, like Herb Cohen, the famous negotiator, says, history changes, it comes back dressed differently, but it's more or less the same themes.
Hmm.
Um, and I kind of feel that way. Like as it relates to risk and danger, especially like, you know, sort of modern day famous stories of young kids who have gone abroad in Singapore and North Korea and stuff like that terrify me. And I don't know what really
Hmm.
happened in those cases. I like to think that if I obey the laws in a place like that, that maybe I won't get killed or hurt. But I don't know. Maybe bad luck just happens to people sometimes. But I've found, and there's exceptions, like those surfers that got killed in Cabo last year. Um, you,
Hmm.
I just read about the story again yesterday, totally coincidentally, because friends of mine are vacationing in Cabo, but they're staying at the Hard Rock. These people were camping outside. They were surfers. Um, but when I'm in someplace like, I don't know, Acapulco, like I'm very comfortable. My Spanish is current. So I'm very comfortable hopping in a cab and saying, take me to an authentic restaurant owned by a friend of yours. Maybe I shouldn't do that.
Hmm.
Maybe, maybe I'm in danger. But on the other hand, I don't know if I can live my life in any other way. Do I want to be scared? Like, is most of the world dangerous? Is it more dangerous today than it was half a generation ago or a generation ago? Is there more
Yeah, and I
resident
don't know.
evil?
It's easy. Yeah, yeah, it's easy. It's easy to say. Everyone just says like, well, back in the day it was safer, right? But I think human, right? Other people have said actually this time we currently live in is like the least violent in the ever in human history.
Well,
Uh,
Harari writes about it in *Sapiens*. He says 1,000 years ago, if you met
mhm.
another man in the wild, you were either going to kill him, collaborate with him, or try to subjugate him, make him a slave, or have sex with him. He's like, there's like a few options. Today you just walk by him on the street
Yeah,
for the most part.
yeah, 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 for sure. No, I mean for the most part, and this is not the case for everybody and not everywhere in the world, right? But for the most part, when you leave your house, you're not, uh, concerned that someone's going to take everything you own and then kill you and leave you in the street, right? For the
Right.
most part. And that was actually kind of the reality for most humans for most of our existence. If you saw someone outside of your group, that it's not going to go well,
Yeah.
right?
I'm
So,
reading a book right now about Comancheria, which is this huge area of Texas, in the prairie, sort of
mm,
north and
sure,
and west of north and west of
yeah,
like San Antonio, Austin, that area. And there were something like, I don't know, 16,000 or 20,000 Comanches, and they stayed far enough west for as long as possible until they didn't have a choice because of the encroachment. But the stuff that the white man and the Comanches and all Indians do to each other, I mean, just really
mm,
terrible. If the Comanches come upon a fort and it's not protected, I mean, this book is just replete with, I think it's
yeah.
something of the summer moon. I forget what the title is, but it's
Yeah,
about
I believe
Quanah
I think I read
Parker.
that years
Quanah
ago.
Parker is this child of a white woman and an Indian chief, and he becomes the most famous Comanche chief. And there is there's arguably no safety. There's no such thing as safety all the time. And at that time, there was virtually no safety anytime. But then the author does a really good job of pointing out that, like 80% of the interactions between the encroaching settlers and the Indians were actually not warlike. There was a lot of trade going on, and, there was some
Mhm.
intermarrying, and, there's a lot of gray area. But in the end, after Sam Houston, there's this governor of Texas or president of Texas, because it was an autonomous region at that point. I forget his name, but he had like a French name. It might have been Bonaparte. And he just decided, like, this just isn't going to work. He made a pronouncement. We have to wipe out and I always thought, like, when I hear these stories, I'm like, that wasn't policy. He was just stating what he felt was obvious. The white man is just going to keep going west forever in the hopes of having land that they can farm, and the nomadic and hunting and gathering of most of the Native Americans, Comanche in particular, they weren't farmers. It's just not congruent with what the agrarian society adopted or being perpetuated by the white people. Just they could not live together. So he concluded, we're just going to kill them all. I'm only halfway through the book, but it's exceptionally violent, and the examples of torture that he writes about.
When you said that, yeah, so you reminded me of. You ever read the book Gift of Fear?
No.
I forget who wrote it. It's a really interesting. We could talk about that forever. I'd love to actually talk about that with you. But one of the things that he says at one point, he's got like a focus group, and he asks people, "Okay, close your eyes for a second and imagine the most despicable, hedonistic thing that one person could do to somebody else. Take a second if you want to and imagine that awful, terrible thing." And then he says, "Now open your eyes." He goes, "I guarantee you that's been done. Like anything you could imagine, the humans can imagine they've done to each other, unfortunately."
Yeah. I mean, the examples of torture are so horrible. Like, I can scarcely read it. But in any event, thank you very much for your time.
On that note, yeah.
And we definitely got to get together. Let's do breakfast at the Route 7 Diner, the Metro 7 Diner, it's called now.
There it is. Yeah, great. I'd love to. You tell me when.
All righty. Thanks for your time. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Pat.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoy the most fascinating podcast in the world, please follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and follow on Apple Podcast.